our perspective, our attitude actually can be quite important in terms of how we are able to either see and hear and follow our authentic inner unique guidance or not. That authentic, unique inner guidance is available to each and every one of us all of the time. Question is, how often are we actually really aligned with it? How often are we authentically really listening, seeing, feeling, and deeply intuitively knowing that? Only you know the answer to that. We often think we are. The ego and our beliefs often project onto reality, and then we are unknowingly deluded and run down all kinds of pathways that are, well, ultimately learning experiences that are important, that really help facilitate our evolution, our transformation, and our healing. I usually have so much I want to share with you and give you, because my deep desire for you is that you are happy, is that you find your true, authentic happiness and fulfillment. And I know that sitting in the silence, especially when one is attuned into this beautiful, vast, interconnected presence that we all are, that is really that's the true teaching. That's the light of transformation and healing. It is intrinsically what we are. It's intrinsically what everything is. It's intrinsically what we've always been. Our attitude about coming to satsang, or whatever you want to call this, or meditating or practicing, it's interesting how that will evolve over time as you begin and develop in your practice, in your discovery, in your learning. Some of the things I thought I would share with you are just some perspectives that are helpful, I think, can be helpful, that practice is like putting oil in machinery. It doesn't create the machine. It doesn't make the machine run. It doesn't produce the products of the machine. It simply may help it run more smoothly. May not. Another image I like is of taking a glass and scooping a glass of murky river water that's brown and filled with sediment, whatever. Taking it, and there it is, and you put it on the table, and you just let it sit there, and eventually the sediment settles out and there's clarity. And clarity is what we need to be able to see without our fears in the way, without our trauma in the way, without our needs in the way, without our frustrations in the way, without our hopes in the way. Clear seeing is not something you can do. It's not something you can practice. Clear seeing is the result, can be the result of practice. When you have awakened or had a glimpse or a taste of your true nature, which is really true for all of us, even though we may not even know it. I forgot what I was going to say. Sorry. It amuses me. I'm sorry. I apologize, but it is amusing for me. There was somewhere I was going. Oh my goodness. Okay. I get excited, you know. I'm like a little kid sometimes, probably a lot. That spark within you, your essential light, your beingness, your aliveness has gotten your attention one way or another. That's why we're here, each and every one of us. And we have, each and every one of us has our own unique story about it. There is no uniformity in transformation and healing. It's uniquely individual and authentic. This is very important to understand if you're utilizing techniques and practices and so forth coming here, so you don't get caught in and trapped by what you've heard, by what you've read, by what you believe, by what you've experienced and believe the experience was or is. The mind naturally creates, and the ego and the emotional structure and all, but the survival mechanism naturally creates meaning all the time about things. Is it really true? Relatively speaking, only, and probably only temporarily. That's why when the world flips, like it has, it's pretty difficult and often catastrophic. Even in my own family, as you know, for those of you who know. And so recently, my mother-in-law died of COVID. And tragically, sadly, horribly, actually. And life forces us, our guiding force within us, the truth of us, forces us to evolve. And sometimes it does great harm and damage in the process. But we're learning. We all, each and every one of us, are learning to return to our original nature and to heal our trauma, to allow our trauma to be healed, and for us to regain connection with ourself deeply, profoundly, on all levels, each other, and the planet. Because we're not separate at all. None of us are, and we're not separate from Mother Earth either, not really. So, a friend of mine who's a teacher of trauma therapists who work with trauma in their patients, shared a beautiful, beautiful insight that I have found quite helpful to hear and know, and I'm going to share it with you. You probably already know this, but trauma takes our humanity away from us. And so when we practice, when we come here and we stop and the sediment settles and we start to have clarity, the wounds can be more painful because now we're truly feeling them. And the pain is a call to your pure attention to bring loving compassion to those sensations and feelings and even historical experiences, however you experience them. So true practice is ultimately a self-healing practice. It isn't that you heal yourself or that you clear your trauma, but rather you become conscious of in a way that you haven't before. And the presence that we are is infinite spaciousness and light. And that spaciousness is the space that allows what was not possible before for healing and becoming more unified in your true nature, which is what we call the integration of awakening or the integration of enlightenment. Enlightenment and awakening are completely natural flowerings of our human nature. It isn't something that we make happen or do by any practices or beliefs. They're natural flowerings that happen. Just because we awaken or have enlightenment, there's no guarantee of integration at all. None. It will, for many people, give them access to power, and that's a very dangerous situation. Because power without integrity, without a balanced state of mind, is dangerous and very seductive. So be careful of how you perceive that as it emerges in you and as you perceive it in others, so you don't get seduced into exacerbating trauma. A friend of mine we've been friends for many decades, and he's a healer and a teacher of healers, and also, like all of us, has been on a very profound spiritual journey a lot of his life. We're talking about the abuse of power and authority and with spiritual teachers and so forth. And he said, yes, when somebody has power, it's the reason to not trust, to be really careful. And we often, when there's power, we naturally trust because we go, oh, this is it. I feel so good being in this amazing field of presence. I feel the love, and they're so brilliant and articulate. And that's when you need to be more careful, that you don't project onto that a belief or hear them tell you how enlightened they are or whatever. And I'm speaking of this because I know there are those of you here who have been very traumatized by people who have been given authority one way or another in the true authentic search, as you are, for healing and transformation. And we are all learning together in this journey. I'm a student like you are, learning all the time. There is no one who's better than anybody else on this path. There's nobody who's more enlightened than anybody. All that is ridiculous ego nonsense. There are people who have been very fortunate that their awakenings and enlightenments have really integrated, and that they are loving, caring, authentically trustworthy people. And thank goodness these people are around, and you are one of them. You are one of those people who is also letting the natural movement of healing and freedom emerge into your foreground of being. Being here helps clarify perception. And it helps attune one to the true resonance of who you are, which is not separate from me or anybody else or anything else. That's why we feel this energy and this connectedness with those who are sensing it right now, here. The presence, which is, there is no ownership, there's no boundaries, there's no one who is present. And yet presence is what we all fundamentally are. Because I speak both relatively in language and I also speak absolutely in terms of language, I don't get into all of the mess with trying to change the language so you know, oh, he's speaking now about ultimate reality and now he's speaking about relative reality. It may confuse you a little bit and it may sound a little bit contradictory sometimes because of that. But I don't want to waste time with that because I know that as you find your way, it will be obvious, the difference and the distinction. Because they're not really separate, actually. There is no separation. And yet the way our mind thinks and the way we live is separate, experienced as, and in very many ways, is completely separate. You know, when I have a bite of chocolate, you're not necessarily going to enjoy it. You know, you might, if you're really empathetic, you might actually go, wow, yeah, you might actually have what we call empathetic joy, which is wonderful, where you take great pleasure in others' fulfillment. That's pretty high level humanity. How rare is that? Rare. We usually see someone else and go, oh, I want that. I don't have that. I lack that. I'm lacking. I'm not enough. The areas of yourself that are unconscious, that are protected, that are shut down, are traumatized. Being in this environment will begin to help heal the trauma and release the energy of that and help you find more fulfillment and freedom. It can be very difficult to be here, I know that. Whether I'm not just speaking here in this room right now, even though I can see for some of you, you can't even sit still. You can't even just be here and be present. That's okay. I'm not judging. I'm just acknowledging it. To be with yourself and pay attention. And see if you can just be uncomfortable and not fix it. If you can just feel what you're feeling and not figure it out. If you can just surrender to the one who is suffering, notice how that is, even if it's for a split second, to stop struggling with what is.